Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Behavioral Insights Student Group at Harvard, I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's event, which kicks off our book talk series. And we are honored to host two esteemed scholars who have profoundly shaped our understanding of human behavior, relationships, conversations, power, and perceptions. And before we start our conversation, I'm delighted to introduce our amazing moderator, Dr. Alison Wood Brooks, who also has her first book coming out soon. So we hope we can welcome her back soon for presenting her book on a talk, The Science of Conversation and the Art of Being Ourselves. Alison Wood Brooks is the O'Brien Associate Professor of Business Administration at HBS, and where she created and teaches a course called Talk. And as a behavioral scientist, she's a leading expert on the science of conversation. Her award-winning research has been published in top academic journals and is recently cited in media outlets such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, and NPR. And her research has received numerous awards and has been referenced as two of the top 10 most TED Talks that have been watched of all time and depicted in the Pixar's Inside Out 2. And in 2021, she was named as one of best 40 under 40 business school professors by Poets and Quads. So we are really thrilled to have you here and start the conversation on our book today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I wish every conversation started with somebody saying, okay, start the conversation. Hi, everybody. We're so excited to be here. It is my absolute delight to introduce you to Dr. Alison Fragale, who is a professor at UNC. Though she looks impossibly youthful, she's been a professor there since 2004 for 20 years. Which is the year after I graduated from high school, when Snoop Dogg had Drop It Like It's Hot on the radio. And 3 years before our mutual friend Adam Grant even joined the faculty at UNC, let alone Wharton, where I met him in grad school. Alison has a PhD from Stanford, where she worked with an amazing advisor named Maggie Neal, who she talks about in the book. And that's where she began her prolific career as a scholar. She's studied the behaviors that earn and reduce and reflect status, dominance, authority, and power, particularly in the context of the workplace and in negotiations. She spent time working for McKinsey outside of academia, and she's just an incredible keynote speaker who blessedly focuses on making her talks both entertaining and educational, which is rare among academics. Her killer new book is called Likeable Badass: How Women Get the Success They Deserve. It is science-backed. It's just chock full of easy to implement plays and moves and strategies for women to get the respect, power, and influence that they want and deserve in a world that's stacked against us. I've already learned so much from Alison by observing and following her career in academia and by reading and listening to this amazing book. Really, Alison, you made me feel sort of like Elsa from Frozen and helped me step into my power. So welcome to Harvard. Welcome to the Behavioral Insights Group. We're so happy to have you here. I'm going to dive right in because I don't want to waste any time.
Do it.
My question is, what alchemy of people and experiences and emotions, traits that you have in your life led you to be the person who made this glorious decision to pitch and write and sell this book, Likeable Badass?
So, okay, that's a hard lead-off question. But I would say, here's the thing. I was the benefit of some great mentoring and some chance experiences that shaped this. So a couple of things came together. One is, at a fairly young age, I came into contact with amazing women like Maggie Neal, who's in the book, who's now a professor emeritus at Stanford, who were very, very, very impactful at helping me think very strategically about how to use the psychology of our field to navigate my own career and my own life. And if not for that wisdom, I don't think I would have become as self-aware of a lot of the ways in which the research that we do could be used to navigate navigate our lives, and particularly as women. So that's one benefit. The other thing that happened to me is my students. So like you, I teach, and although gender representation in business schools has changed a lot over the, so I shouldn't say changed a lot, changed some over the 20 years I've been a professor. I still have more men in my class than I have women. But there's the moment after class when people come to you at the podium or they email you and they say they want to meet with you. And what I found was that those conversations were dominated by my women students. And they were coming to me basically saying, Alison, you teach negotiation and influence. Well, let me tell you about a problem I'm having. And it would either range from a psychological impediment, like it's really hard for me to ask for these things, or an objective challenge that they were confronting with their audience not being able to get what they wanted. And I would say it's a light bulb, but it wasn't a light bulb that like went from off to on. It was a light bulb that had a dimmer switch. So it got like brighter and brighter and brighter slowly over time. Was, oh, wait, women have challenges that perhaps their male counterparts don't have, and that we weren't doing a great job of disseminating the science of our field to be able to help women answer those challenges with the best evidence that we had available to us. And what I realized I had been doing all along was not only doing research in psychology, but using the research that we were all conducting to think about, how do I show up to be my best, most authentic and strategic self? And so as I started sharing that advice of, okay, well, here's what we know from science and here's what might help you, I realized that there was a space for us to do that better, not just me, but as academics. And so I don't think it's a set of like characteristics or traits I was born with. I always tell people, whether it's negotiation or status, just because I teach this stuff for a living doesn't mean I was born with better like habits or traits than any other human being. I make all the same mistakes. I do all the same things. I just have the knowledge and the insight to like judge myself for it when it happens, because I knew the science to know better. But those were the two things that really came together, was getting some really good advice about how to think about navigating my professional life as a woman, and seeing my students come to me with their challenges and realizing and reflecting that advice back to them. The two things that came together to put this book, into the world. And then the third thing was just pure opportunity, which is I had wanted to do it for a while, but as you know, right, it's hard to carve out space to write a book and do anything else.
Remarkably
And,
hard.
and by the way, have, be a one-eyed Allison with 3 children, as we both are. So this book, I haven't talked about when you started yours, but honestly, if the COVID pandemic hadn't forced us all into our homes and canceled every single thing on my calendar, this book would still not exist. I mean, when I was being interviewed for it, they'll say like, why did you write this now? And I was like, because I wasn't going to bake sourdough bread and I had already watched The Tiger King. I'm like, is that a sufficient answer for why now? I was like, because that's when I had the time to write it. So COVID gave me the opportunity to do this. And now here we are.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack here. So I think you're exactly right. You were gifted with incredible mentorship and luck, and you're even luckier that you got it from a badass woman herself. You're gifted with this privilege of teaching and getting a sort of microcosm sample of humanity, of the world, is really a privilege that educators get. It's also extremely overwhelming and exhausting, but you get to see sort of trends among populations of people that otherwise I think people wouldn't get. You get in dribs and drabs as you go through your life, but educators, when you're teaching a group of 100 or 200 students at a time, you see patterns in people's needs and desires and what they're struggling with. Describing how the students come down to you at the end of class resonates so much. In general, there's also a meta point there, which is like, yes, I think it does tend to be more women than male students, but also if you could measure how many students are coming down to talk to you specifically at the end of class, I think it is many more than possibly your male colleagues, which is like another sort of signal of what's going on here in terms of gender dynamics. There's something that I grapple with when I am interacting with my female students and really thinking about these sort of gender issues in general. And I wanted to ask you this question. I think I know your answer based on how you wrote the book, but I would love to hear you talk about it. This balance between indulging our frustration about how unfair the world is, sort of wallowing in the problem that like the world is unfair for women and it's harder. Like, how much should we indulge those cyclical feelings of rage about it, which are triggered everywhere, right? I see how people talk about my daughter compared to my sons. I notice that, more students are coming to meet with me than others. I'm trying to make inferences about the outcome of the election. There's like these triggers that make us feel angry about gender dynamics in the world today. And the question I wanted to ask you is, like, how do you think it's productive to indulge those feelings of anger, to talk about the problems, or do we just sort of work towards acceptance of, like, this is how the world is and we need to confront it as it is and turn our attention to what the hell we can do about it, the solutions?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is I don't think there's a right way for any human being to be. Here's how I think about it and what I tried to put into the book and advice. You know, I wrote this book to try to take what I was doing in one-to-one conversations and disseminate it to people who would never get to sit in a business school classroom, who would never sit in a professional development program, to give them tools. It's very informed by the conversations I would have. The conversations I would have would often be somebody who says, I'm confronting a problem in my workplace right now. I have something I want. I want to be strategic and think about how I could get that. That person does not have the luxury to change systemic bias before they can go get what I want. And I don't think they would feel much comfort in, well, when systemic bias goes away, so will your problem. It was much more acute than that. What can we do in the next week, month, whatever, to get you good results? So the book is definitely written with that in mind, because that's definitely a population that I have served. But here's how I feel about it. I often liken it to finding out that you have a medical diagnosis or you're at risk of inheriting something because of your genetics. That's crappy and it's unfair. And your neighbor doesn't have to deal with it. And you don't deserve it, but it's still your life. And the question I would ask is, well, what would you do if that was your life? There'd be moments where you'd be mad. And there'd be moments where you'd be an activist and you'd say, okay, well, I'm going to champion research because we really should solve this problem for everybody, not just me. And we should, like, the doctors who do these things, the medical community should figure out how this shouldn't happen to anybody anymore. But at the same time, while all that was happening, you probably wouldn't sit and wait and say, when the doctors figure it out, I guess I'll be back on a level playing field with everybody else. You would say, is there any evidence-based actions that I could take right now to deal with this unfair thing I've been handed, so that I could live my happiest, best fulfilling life? And acknowledging it's unfair that my neighbor doesn't have to do it, I do. But hey, you know what? The things I have to do actually aren't really that hard. And if I could exercise a little more, eat a little better, and it gave me a chance to basically have the same quality of life as someone else, sure, sign me up. So I think about managing something like status or any other gender-based disadvantage that way, which is, it is unfair. There's moments to be mad about it. There's moments to work toward a system-wide solution. And there's also moments where you feel like the best thing you can do today is to manage the variables you can control so that you can live a life that's as joyous and rewarding as the person next to you that doesn't have to deal with this.
I love your can-do attitude. Yes, so sort of solutions focus. It's both acknowledging, like, yes, this may not be fair. It's okay to feel frustrated and angry about it sometimes, cyclically, from triggers all over the place. But then also, what can we do about it? And your book does such a beautiful job of tackling this, like, what can we do as individuals, especially when we're possibly in low power, low status positions. And I think a lot of the listeners today will be very excited to hear some of these practical tools and moves. Many of them fall under this umbrella of this idea of strategic authenticity, which I find just so, it really resonates with me. I find it so compelling. Can you just talk a little bit about this mindset of strategic authenticity, and then we can move a little bit into the specific moves, especially around, I guess, self-promotion, possibly, how to be strategically authentic?
Yeah, so I think there's a narrative that I hear a lot of times. We are very pro authenticity. I'm very pro authenticity. Nobody more so than me. But sometimes I think that's taken as authenticity means I just, like, have no filter. I do what I want. I run around with no regard to any social expectations, and it is what it is. And I don't think that there's a different version of it, which is I can be authentic and I can also be very strategic. So, an example would be similarity attraction. it's true that we are drawn to people who have something in common with us. And we like people that are like us. That's the same, like, when you see somebody who has the sticker from your alma mater, or the license plate of your sports team, or the t-shirt, that represents something that, something you belong to, you're more inclined to approach that person. You're going to smile at that person. You might say, hi. That's that being drawn to it. It's authentic. I'm just naturally drawn to it. But to recognize that, hey, when I can when I can highlight a similarity between people, that's going to get me some credit in their eyes. They're going to be more interested in developing a relationship with me, stopping to talk to me, if you will. That can be strategic. Or, just before we hopped on this, I was in a meeting and someone asked me, how's the book going? Okay. Now, the answer is, like, the first thing that came to my mind was yesterday, I started my day at 4 a.m. I started doing live events at 8 a.m. and I didn't end till 9 p.m. And my husband's out of town. So in between, I took a couple breaks and tooled some kids around. I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And that's a true statement. At the same time, what's an equally true statement is it is a massive privilege that many people wanted to talk to me about the ideas in my book. And so I had a choice to make, both of which are authentic. But I think when I'm in this moment, in this particular setting, I don't really need support on the fact that my day was long. I can save those complaints for my husband when he calls me from his trip. But really to say, okay, well, what could I say that is true that also allows me to show up as the two dimensions that are important for status? I care about other people and I know what I'm doing. To say, I have been really grateful that this book has brought me into contact with so many people that did not know I existed, and vice versa, before I wrote it. And that I'm making the impact that I kind of in the back of my mind wanted to have when I wrote the book. That's also true. But from the perspective of managing my relationship, it might be more strategic than what first came to mind, which was my 5-minute rant about how long my day was. So that's where I think it can exist beautifully together, where you don't ever have to be something you're not. I never go around saying something that's not true, or that I'm in a good mood when I'm not, or I had a great day. But we often have multiple versions of stories we can tell. And being strategic and authentic just means taking a pause and saying, at this moment, what's the story I want to put out into the world? And then I pick that one. Sometimes it can be the very negative one, but sometimes it might be something that maybe is a little bit more status building.
Yeah, yeah. It's like when you're talking to people, you're constantly sort of curating the full contents of your mind. You can't possibly convey all the things that are up there.
Exactly.
So we're all, in a way, we're all making these choices and trade-offs and all the time. And I think here you're making this argument of like, we'll do it like with more intentionality, more awareness of what you'd actually like to convey to achieve your top priority. Sometimes I mess it up. If you go for example, you go your whole day and you're doing this, doing a really good job sort of self-promoting and working towards these goals you really care about. I find that I often will like come home and sort of dump the other stuff, the like complaints about exhaustion and too much stuff on my family, or when I'm talking to my mom on the phone, or to my husband. And so I think for me now, I'm trying to think about, well, can I do a better job of curating, even especially with the people that I'm closest to? I think is a hard challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
And there's nothing wrong with, in a moment, even in a professional relationship, saying what I most want out of this is support. I'm going to tell you about like all the things that are going poorly, the things I think I don't well. There's nothing that's authentic as well. But I think, the main thing, two things I really don't want for people, especially women. One is to feel like you ever have to take a piece of advice that feels like it doesn't fit you, and it feels like wearing someone else's clothes. There's never a need for that. How you show up matters, but the way you get there, you have a tremendous amount of license. So I care about that. And I also care about people not unintentionally doing something or saying something that then they are left to live with the consequences later and they don't like. So I mean, I can give you one specific example. It just happened like 2 weeks ago. A UNC student said to me, I just did my internship and I was very honest in my internship about things I'm not good at that I want to be better at because I want to grow. But now I'm getting the sense that I got kind of like pigeonholed or whatever as someone who's not good at those things. And now if I go to work there, I'm going to be starting in a reputational hole to do this. And I said, well, it's already happened. I think you'll be able to get out of it. People will forget about you and forget what you said by the time you go back. But I said, going forward, a slight change in language could be equally authentic, but more strategic. Like, I suck at fill in the blank. I'm terrible. I'm really, really not good at it. I really need to get better is one narrative versus one of my growth goals is to be even better in this area. I'm really excited about the opportunity I have to be able to take on, take on responsibility that's going to push me forward in this area. They're both acknowledging a desire for improvement. In the second one, you're not saying you're amazing. You're not saying anything that's true, but you didn't have to voluntarily cut yourself down all the way to the bottom to be able to communicate the same thing. And so that's one of the things I help people with is with just a little bit more of a pause and intention, you could communicate what you wanted to say. I want to get better here without putting in your audience's mind, oh, like Alison is terrible at this.
Totally. Yeah, you're sort of a queen of the reframe, which I admire very much. Reframes like this are so powerful, even though in your own mind, you're like, but it's sort of saying the same thing. And you're like, yeah, that's the point. Other people are going to receive that very, very differently. When we think about self-promotion, so we're kind of in this area of thinking like, well, how can you communicate about your mind to other people in a way that doesn't put you at a sort of strategic disadvantage? And the sort of first question I love thinking about with self-promotion is just like, where does it happen? Like, where in our lives are we having these conversations? Do you think about that at all? Like, where are the opportunities? Who are we talking to? What modalities are we communicating on where these reframes like this one happen? Where does self-promotion happen?
It happens anytime you open your mouth or to pick or use your fingers to type or however else, I think there's a notion that self-promotion is, we don't like the word. I've done research on it. I still don't really love the word. I use the word, but I think there's this idea that like self-promotion means you're going to walk up to somebody at a cocktail party who's minding their own business. You're going to tap them on the shoulder. And when they turn around, you're going to give them a 30-minute monologue of all the great things you've done. I say, no one wants that. Please don't do that. It's a terrible idea. But that's not how it happens. It comes out in small little pieces of how we start to tell our stories. And so, let me I'll take a step back on the self-promotion for a second, then we'll talk about like where are the drips and drabs. So one thing is that was very impactful that happened to me in my career that I talk about in the book is when I started at McKinsey as a young post-college, like 21-year-old, I encounter to this day, like the greatest meaning, the most egregious self-promoter I've ever seen. Who, as far as I could tell, had nothing to self-promote about, was neither kind nor confident, an older male colleague. But what I saw at McKinsey, which was a very competitive, high type A, upper out kind of place, was that this self-promotion had worked spectacularly well and that he had a glowing reputation, despite having worked with him, seeing he had no skills whatsoever. And for a lot of people, when they encounter somebody like that in their environment, it's very off-putting. And what it teaches them is self-promotion is just awful and icky, and I won't do that. But for me, I actually was fascinated by it. And this is, I think, one of the reasons I was destined to become an organizational psychologist, was I was like, well, wait a second. That guy's an idiot. And if his self-promotion can be that useful, imagine how well it could work if you're not an idiot. And so I actually found that it made me at a fairly young age lean into this idea that, oh, wow, storytelling really works. And then fast forward, you mentioned our mutual connection to Adam Grant. So yes, everyone will always say like, how do you know Adam? And I was like, oh, I hired Adam. And then people are like, what? I was like, yeah, I hired Adam. So he came from Michigan and I was the next most junior person when he came out of school. And so we went to dinner. I was you're the youngest faculty member. It's your job to take the young faculty candidates to dinner. So I went to dinner with Adam, and I don't think he would mind you saying, like, I haven't talked to him about this in a while, but Adam has some food allergies, and I spent the entire dinner fearful that he was accidentally going to take a bite of something he shouldn't, and I was going to have to like resuscitate him at the table, which I thought was going to be a really stressful thing, and if I like lost a job candidate, but he did not. There were no issues. But at that dinner, we started talking about work we had always wanted to, questions we had always been curious about, but had never done. And I told him at this dinner that one of the things I had always been curious about was why this very off-putting colleague's self-promotion had been so effective. And I had a theory about it. And Adam was like, I think that's right. We should do it. And we ultimately did do it. So from that came, my working relationship with Adam, came to my belief that self-promotion, I mean, I always say, like, if you live your whole life, like living and working in a cave, no one's going to know about you. Most of what people know about you comes from you. So you can call it storytelling, you can call it self-promotion, but like they've read something on your website, they've interacted with you, they've seen something on a social media post, they've received an email from you. These are all parts of stories. And so when we use all the tools available to us, you start to realize how often you learn about people's stories. So one assignment I give to people is like, don't say anything about yourself, just listen to other people and listen to what you learn about them. And then anytime you're learning something, they've told you a part of their story. And how did it come out? Did it come out on social media? Did it come out like in a direct conversation with them? Did it come out from overhearing them talk to somebody else? Did it come out from something they said when they were like officially presenting? Stories come out in all these ways. So we can talk about some of my ideas if you want, but I think that's really important to remember is self-promotion is not just like a single moment. It's just all the ways in which we layer on our story.
Totally. And often in these sort of like micro moments and doing these sort of reframes of like, am I going to complain about being tired, or am I going to say like, no, I'm amazing and I had this amazing opportunity today. The way you tell the story in the book, I absolutely loved, because you were both pissed because you saw this colleague not being good at his job, but you were also sort of baffled of like, why do other people think he's good? Like, what's going on here? And so you tracked the chain. Well, like, who told you he was good? And then like, who told that person he was good? Who told that person? And the chain all went all the way back around to the terrible colleague himself, who's like at the end of it, like he's just doing a better job selling himself, regardless of what his actual performance and behavior are, which I think is true so much of the time, and about how information spreads from person to person. We have tremendous power over shaping our own narratives in other people's minds. I just absolutely loved it, which gets back to this idea, this sort of the interplay between self-promotion versus other promotion, because we have the power to harness other people as sort of like a mouthpiece for amplifying our own self-promotion, but they also can promote you, right? Like they can say nice things about you. And as a woman, this like so resonates with me. Like that is the dream. As much as I don't want to sort of brag about myself, I do really want other people to say nice things about me. And I think everybody feels that way. Can you talk a little bit about this like power of being embedded in a social network and thinking about how we can sort of leverage other people to say nice things about us?
Totally. So if you think right now, like people who know you exist, everything they know about you has come from one of two channels. It's either come from something you've directly put out into the world, like something you've said, they've interacted, you've written it, or it's come from something somebody else has said about you or written about you, generally when you're not around. And those two things form the sum total of everything people know about us. So the idea is, what I try to do is simplify it for people to say, okay, well, the better I can control each of those channels, the more I shape the way my audience sees me, for the better, for my advantage. And so that the self one, we've been told about this for a long time. People can do it better or worse. People can find new channels, but the idea that one should present themselves in a positive light to get better results from their audience is not new. The other one is something I think we think about less. When you hear that someone has said something nice about you behind your back, you feel amazing. You're grateful to that person. It lifts you up. But it doesn't have to be just a happy accident. There are things we can do that can make it more likely. And although I never want to absolve anybody from telling their own story, because you do, the truth is that other people promoting you is, one, highly efficient because there's way more of them than there are of you. So more people can be doing this for you. And it also is highly effective because when someone else talks us up, there is no bound on how positive they can be at us. They could say, like, Alison Wood Brooks is the greatest human who has ever walked this planet. And someone would be like, extreme, but okay, I accept it. But you cannot walk around with good results saying, I am the greatest person to ever walk this planet. So they can be really, really effusive about us in very positive ways. So the things I think about, if I break it down, like I'm a listy kind of person, is three things we can do that can get more of this to happen for us more often is, one, come into contact with more people. Yeah. So I always say, if someone does not know you exist, they cannot be talking you up. So first is just letting them know you exist, and in all kinds of ways, whether that is on social, which I think we have different opinions about. Like, I think I might be more pro social media than you are, just based on your book acknowledgments, but I don't know if that's true for sure. So like that could be
I'm coming around. I'm coming around, Alison.
Are you?
You're inspiring me.
Okay. So you can meet more people. And so we haven't talked about this either. I'm an introvert. Many times people don't understand that about people whose job it is to speak for a living. But I do find conversations exhausting, which is why my 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. in front of people yesterday was so tiring. Um, and so as a result, I'm often not a person who puts myself in situations to meet more people. I'm the person who likes to find a reason that you can't go to the cocktail hour or, whatever. I thought COVID was really great at being able to like cut my list of friends by like 50%. It's like, haven't seen him in 2 years, don't need to see him again. Anyway, but it has really starting to think about it as a psychologist has inspired me to meet more people, because you never know where your next other promoter will come from. And I talk in the book about a couple specific strategies that I've gotten from a woman who's now a friend named Rachel Sheeran. But Rachel has opened a tremendous amount of doors for me. I do a lot of work training and speaking to women, not just inside the walls of universities, but outside as well. And Rachel's made some really amazing introductions to groups, very large groups that serve women, that have then brought me on to work with them. But I always say that the most interesting part of that story is not that she promoted me, but where I met her, which was in an airport bar, in the Raleigh-Durham Admirals Club, when she had the seat next to me at the bar, and I just started talking with her. And by the end of that, we, had highlighted a bunch of similarities. We stayed in touch. We've now become friends. And she's opened a lot of doors. And so you never know where the next person will come from. So that's one thing I think about. And I think about in the context of other research. I don't know if the No Club authors have come to this group yet, but they're amazing. For Pittsburgh-based academics who wrote a book called
Lisa Vesterlund. Who else is that? Who else is that? The authors on the
Lori Weingart and
right.
Brenda Peiser.
Amazing. Yes.
Four amazing women write this book that turns like self-help into research about why are women saddled with non-promotable tasks at work and what do you do about it. But I say that because although we can't say yes to everything, and we shouldn't say yes to everything, one of the things that's been impactful for me, and I will say I got this through my mentorship from Maggie Neal, was using who will I meet as one of my criteria for whether I would say yes to a task, even one that on its surface may seem non-promotable. That using discretionary activities or saying yes to things, voluntary activities, as a way to bring new people into your network can be a very effective way to do that. And then those people can then become part of your set of other promoters. But however you'd like to do it, thinking about natural ways to bring yourself into contact with more people, thinking about quick and easy ways that we can add value to their life is the second thing, because people are not going to promote you if they do not see you as valuable, if they do not honor your status. So you have to establish yourself in some way. But if you're going to do that with a lot of people, you cannot invest deeply in every single relationship. So when you're meeting someone at the airport and there's 20 minutes before your flight is going to leave, what does that mean to like invest in that relationship? And it could be, hey, like, are you coming to my city? Like, do you need a restaurant recommendation or a hotel recommendation, or do you want to know about shows to see? Or it could be, I'm going to make an introduction for you because now that you've told me a little bit about what you do at the bar, I know somebody who might like to meet you, and vice versa. Or it could be like, I'm a professor, so I read stuff. So when people say like, oh, like, you tell me what industry you're in, I'm like, oh, if you haven't already, you might really like this book by so-and-so. So thinking of easy ways that you could say, I'm going to add value to that person's life. So in their brain, they're like, oh, I know you're useful and you're helpful. And that's going to be a good start. And then the third one is you have to give people a reason to pick up the microphone. So you have a ton of people you respect at this moment. I have a ton of people I respect. We have a lot of overlap and a lot of, individual people. But how many of those people that we really, really value and think highly of have today, at this point, 11:35 Eastern, have we actually gone on record somewhere in the world and said, this person's amazing? Probably not that many. We were busy. We were doing other things. But it wouldn't take much to tip us from just thinking they're amazing to saying they're amazing in one of two ways. The least scary one is you promote them first. So I always say one of the most strategic and authentic things you can do is be a relentless and loud other promoter for every person in your life that you think is amazing. Tell as many people as you can. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell on social, tell your coworkers, tell them, that's still good. Because relationships survive on reciprocity. We want to treat people the way they treat us. And if you found out that someone was complimentary to you, you cannot wait to find a way to be complimentary to them.
It's so true. It's so true. Yes. Okay. So there's so much to unpack here. Starting with, I am obsessed with trying to figure out how to be helpful to people in small dribs and drabs.
Okay.
So much so. So when people ask for advice about networking, for example, I'm like, guys, it's not about like being charming. It's like literally you have to think about what does this person need and want, and how can I help them get that? Sometimes and often the answer is just like, it can be as simple as make them laugh, or make like in these 10 minutes we have together, can I make you have a good time here? And can we talk about something memorable? But even more than that, there's sort of actions you can do for people, right? Like you can connect them to other people. You can talk about an upcoming event. You can think about ask them what they're working on, and then think about how you could help them further that goal. Whatever it is, I think the mindset, what you're suggesting is like, how can I help this person? Even in a very short period of time, and even in a very small way, it starts to spin these cycles of reciprocity. We're getting great questions, Allison.
I know I just saw it. It's just my eye. This is the professors in us. We're like, you cannot take your eye off the chat. You got to look at the chat. So Maria's is really easy.
Yep.
While you're looking at what other one you want to ask me, I'll answer Maria's, which was the non-promotable book is called The No Club, Putting a Stop to Women's Dead End Work. Available anywhere you buy books.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So what do we have in here that we should, something about networking?
So,
you're driving.
Josh has a couple questions, and I'm very impressed that a man has attended this session. Thank you so much, Josh. And he's asking about confidence. How do we build how can women build confidence? Maybe how men can build confidence, and then about senior leadership. So how can senior female leaders promote themselves in corporate environments where C-suite and senior leadership are littered with men, and more specifically, white men?
Okay. So on the confidence thing, so let me step back for 1 second and say, why is the book titled Likeable Badass? This is fundamentally the work I do is really about status. How do we get respect from other people? I talk about why that's really critically important to our life, happiness and satisfaction, as well as our success and our advancement. But Likeable Badass is my nod to the science of how do status judgments get made? And essentially, this very short answer is that when your audience looks at you, they're always trying to figure out who you are and what you're about. And when they believe two things about you, they will respect you. One is that you care about people other than yourself. And two, that you're good at what you do. They can rely on you to execute tasks effectively. That's the short of it. Likeable Badass is my catchy term for what we as psychologists more often will talk about as either competence and warmth or assertiveness and warmth, one of those dimensions, interpersonal circumflex. So we have a lot of behavioral science people here. So it's really about how you show up to the world. Now, a lot of that, I mean, one of the things I do talk about is one of the bigger impediments to us doing that is if we don't feel that about ourselves, if we don't see ourselves as particularly competent and capable or giving and warm, we may not project that because we have some insecurity. Sometimes we'll talk about as imposter syndrome or confidence. And I do think that these are skills like anything else, and we build those skills with practice. So I'm a huge proponent when you're trying to become a better negotiator or, let your likable badass to the world, et cetera. You find low risk opportunities to practice. You behave like an experimentalist would, which is change one variable, try it, see what works, and then try it again. And as you become comfortable doing things, you turn up the heat to do things. So, and I give a lot of examples in the book about like low, medium, and higher risk ways to practice. But so one like very low risk thing you can do is simply go talk to somebody that you really admire and say, they project likable badass. When I think likable badass, I think of them. And then talk to them and kind of unpack what they do, because the reality is that you have drawn that conclusion based on how they've shown up in the world, often in very small micro moments, and start to just learn from them and to get mentors that you think, I want to kind of get their like magic. It's not magic. They just haven't articulated it to you yet. You can talk about it. Observe how people start to talk about themselves and start to learn. That person was able to communicate a lot about what they were doing. But at the end of it, I didn't find that person self-promoting and off-putting. I just was kind of impressed when they were done. How did they do that? Maybe that's something I could copy. So the listening, the mentoring, the observing, and then finding low risk ways to practice. I always joke with my negotiation students, you should never go to the airport without negotiating something. Because one, something always goes wrong. And so you always have a legitimate opportunity to make your life better. And two, you'll never see those people again if you don't want to. The same is true for thinking about self-promoting, telling your story. Go do it in places where at the end of that conversation, you can completely eject and you will be a stranger again if you want to be. And that's how you start to build your confidence of what to be able to do. And then as it becomes more comfortable, you can bring it into relationships that matter more. The key with self-promotion, whether it's senior women, whether the audience is male or female, it's going to be the same answer. And that is, again, when you try to earn the respect of your audience, you have to hit on two things at the same time. It's not just I'm amazing. It's I am very capable and I use those capabilities for the benefit of people other than myself.
Yeah.
So there's always a way. So for example, like I'll just use book because people are asking me a lot about a book right now. There's a lot of ways to say like, oh, your book seems like it's really successful. Yeah, okay. I don't exactly know what that means, but thank you for saying that. That's great. And you could say like, oh, I'm so happy. Like it's getting, like it's getting awards and it's getting bestseller lists or whatever. But okay, great. That's self-promoting. But a better version, right, is to say something that doesn't diminish the capability, but also talks about benefit to other people. And to say truthfully, right, I've been really flattered by it. It's been really great. And the coolest moments are when a person that does not know me reaches out to me and says the book has helped them. And that makes me feel so good because that's exactly what I want to do, to make women feel empowered, to make them feel informed, and to give them tools that they can absolutely crush their best lives. And in that slight change of narrative, right, I'm putting the attention back on the good that I'm trying to do for the world, which is honest. But by highlighting both of those things, you're able to talk about yourself in a way that is really doing both things you need to be doing, not just one. I think one of the things we think about self-promotion is we think it's only on the dimension of capability. It's not. It's also on the dimension of I care about people other than myself. I make other people's lives better. And the good news is for most people, that storytelling feels a lot more comfortable and authentic. They like it more and it's more effective. So regardless of what your level is or who your audience is, I always tell people your storytelling needs to not just be about you, but also what you've done. Don't diminish that, but also about the good you're doing. And those two things can coexist. There's a phenomenon in psychology called compensatory impression management, which is when we want to make ourselves seem smart, we often act less nice. And we want to make ourselves seem nice, we act less smart. All people do that, not just women. It's a mistake. You can be both to say, this is going well. I acknowledge that. I'm happy about it. And the fact that it's going well is good because insert benefit to other people is the better way to do that.
Totally. There's two questions here, Alison, that I want to tie together and hear your reaction about. An anonymous question asker asked about their 17-year-old daughter is at the sort of beginning of her journey of trying to navigate this. And she said, she wishes that your book was around when she was starting her career. So now she's watching her daughter go through this. And she's going to quote her daughter here. She says, the challenge of what she calls being warm yet strong without coming off as a mean control freak. And then she's saying, like, what advice would you give to a 17-year-old? To me, there's a little bit of a tie here. Also, there's a later question from another anonymous question asker about when other people are saying things, negative things about you behind your back, rather than the sort of like harnessing the power of positive gossip. It's sort of like, well, what about negative gossip? In both of these, I'm seeing a theme about what do we have control over? And what do we not have control over? And I think that would be helpful to hear from you, this idea of control.
Okay. So let me see. Can I put this in the chat to everyone? So one thing on the 17-year-old piece, if anyone has kids out there, this is a podcast I was on that is two teenage sisters in Canada who run a podcast on how to make teenagers happier. And we talked a lot about like navigating life as a teenager, and I have a teenager, on thinking about how to navigate this, because it feels very hard in that stage of life. So, but this is true for adults as well. I always say, like, first mover advantage is incredibly important in these situations. So as we start to think about how do I assert what I want while not being negative or quarrelsome or difficult toward other people, that's a tension we often feel. When we move first, and we are the one who puts our first idea out there, you're in the group project and you're like, hey, here's an idea I have for how we could do it. You're suggesting the weekend plans with your friends rather than wait to see what they say and then tell them you don't like it. First mover advantage in negotiation is really impactful. And it's one of the tools that I try to give to everybody, but I think can be useful even with teenagers to say, you can shape what other people are doing by starting the conversation. And that can help you avoid being the one who has to be the naysayer or say no, which often then leads to a lot of going along with the crowd that in teenage years is not um, particularly productive. Um, and then, and I talk about that at length on there, but I also think teenagers should follow those two women. They're doing something really amazing. And I said, like, they're already very, very well followed on social media. They should have like 1 billion followers. Okay. Can you repeat the second version of that question so I can answer it?
Second one was about negative gossip.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And just reflecting a little bit about like what we do and don't have control over.
Yeah. So obviously, there's a couple things to think about. Like, you cannot control. This is one of the things that's frustrating about status is I quote this, I don't even know, 15th, 16th century playwright in the book, which, by the way, quoting people, I don't know, who died like 700 years ago turns out to be a really annoying thing to do, because then like you can't track that quote down. But nevertheless, the quote is, whether it was said or not, it's a good quote. You control 50% of a relationship, you influence 100% of it. So we don't control these things. We can do amazing work and have someone not value us. We can do nothing wrong to somebody and have them talk badly about it behind our back. It's frustrating. It often leads people to then give up at all on trying to influence, and it'd say, no, you can influence, not perfectly, right? You don't control it. So these things will happen. And I think the things I would think about are, what can I control at the outset of relationships to establish my standing and my respect with as many people as possible so that they're not motivated to talk about me negatively. And they might even talk about me positively and step in if somebody else does. So that's one thing I can control, is how do I show up? And then, in these situations, if something like that happened and you decide, do you care or do you not? Right? You don't have to care about everything. You can choose to say, I'm not investing in that relationship. If that person doesn't respect me, it's fine. And I move on with my life. But if it's a relationship you care about, then I think this is another place where you can use your supporters to counteract your detractors. It's often hard for you to confront a detractor directly, but your supporters might be able to do it, to speak up for you, to stand up for you, things like that, and that you could help rely on them so that, and beyond talking positively about people you value, the second way to get people to be your other promoters is to ask them directly. And so if I knew that I was confronting people who were talking about me negatively, this would be a moment where I would go to my supporters and say, hey, this is happening. I'm not in a great position to do anything about it. You're much better able to speak up on my behalf. I know you really value me. Will you speak up on my behalf? And people who value you are looking for ways to help you, but they're not waking up thinking about you. And they're not knowing you need their help unless you tell them. But when you tell them, they're generally very happy to do something that's a very specific ask that's very much authentic to them because it's aligned with the positive feelings they have about you.
Totally. So in the Q&A, Alison, someone's asking a question about mentorship versus sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And my response was that there's a great behavioral scientist named Rosalind Chow who has a book coming out about sponsorship. So highly recommend that one. She's totally brilliant. But also, Alison's book ends on this really fascinating note, a really deep reflection on mentorship in general. So I would love to just sort of seed that as a topic for you, Alison. How do you think about mentorship, and what can we take away from the chapter on mentorship in your book?
Okay, so as Small World would have it, Roz Chow, who I went to grad school with, I just happened to have her book open on Amazon because I was about to post about it. So I just put it in the chat there. That's coming up in the spring, not long after Alison Wood Brooks' book comes out. that's called The Doors You Can Open. It's really about sponsorship. And I think she does amazing work on that. And she's a real thought leader there. So you should definitely check that out. Yeah, I mean, my basic point on mentorship is a couple things. One is at every stage of career, you should be being mentored and you should be mentoring. And that means that if you are the most senior person in your organization, or you are on the verge of retirement, or you are in high school, you are just starting out your career. So that's two things, is that we should all be looking for that. Two, that when we open the door to mentors plural rather than mentor singular, a lot of good things start to happen. We're much more likely to get mentorship because it's a lot easier lift on both sides to think I don't have to like spend my whole life making your life better. I can just, give you some advice occasionally. But also that we can seek out people for different skills. And so on the subject of status, for example, when we tend to look at mentors, we often start with somebody who's in our career space, but they're ahead of us. And that can be a great mentor. But there's other kinds of advice we need. And sometimes the way we learn how to navigate authentically and strategically in relationships is by getting mentorship from other people who do that well. And to pay attention to who are the likable badasses in your life, to seek out that mentorship, to ask them to break down what they do. And for you, as you become aware of your own behaviors and what's worked for you, to offer that up to other people. So I think that that's really important. And then the third piece I think about on the mentoring other people, something I had to reckon with is what I talk about is broad or deep mentoring. And in academia, it's very much a field that's very heavily based in apprenticeship and mentorship and sponsorship models, more so than perhaps other industries. And I benefited from an advisor whose commitment to her doctoral students was truly life-changing to me. And I mean, she is the mentor that I highlight in this chapter of the book. She has had the deepest relationships with her students. She has, I mean, and I say this, like, she has been the one holding her students' hands when they have passed away. Her love for her students is just immense. I really thought, because I admired her so much, I would want to be her. And one of the things I had to come to terms with in my own career was I actually realized I didn't want to be her. That I don't have as many doctoral students, and I have not made as much difference in her lives as she has made in her students. Yet I have enjoyed what I call broad mentorship immensely, and I've really leaned into it, like taking hundreds of students, thousands of students, and trying to think about how to advise them. Not as deeply as my advisor advised me, but how to reach a lot more of them and how to help make their careers better, and how to use like social media as a mentorship tool, writing a book as a mentorship tool to reach a lot more people. So that's one of the things I really encourage people to think about, is not just to be a mentor, but to really get some self-awareness of how do you like helping make other people's lives better? How do you like teaching? How do you like educating? How do you like investing in people? And I believe that both I am investing in a few people in these highly committed ways, even to the point of sponsorship, is amazing. And I also believe that I am not doing that, but I am investing in many more people in perhaps shallower ways, could also be really, really valuable. And that wasn't something that I really was able to articulate until I was wrestling with a lot of guilt that I had not become the professor to others that my advisor was to me.
Yeah, I think there's a message in what you're saying, Alison, of like, don't forget to give yourself credit for the various ways that your mentorship manifests, which is like, I think the canonical example of mentorship is like these very close, deep relationship, long-lasting relationships where you're like intimately helping a one or a few people, a handful of people, meeting with them very frequently and really hand-holding and sort of like having this relationship. And that's beautiful. That has been one of the most rewarding ways my mentorship has manifested in my career and life. However, we have to remember to give ourselves credit for very different forms of mentorship as well, which includes, by the way, parenting. It includes anything that you're doing that's sort of public facing that you think might have a shred of a chance of helping somebody. So thinking both in terms of depth and breadth, and who also, in which you make this really lovely point in the book that I've just come to feel so strongly about, largely driven by new research by my colleague at Harvard Business School, Ting Zhang. Mentorship comes from above, but it also comes from below. And even when you are low status, which women so often are, you are always in a position to mentor both at your status level and upwards. And I think that has been a very fulfilling way to think about like, what power do we have? People who are low on the totem pole often are better at the actual like hard skills of the work that you're doing. And so sort of emphasizing that and teaching upward and pointing out to people who maybe are like busier than you or more powerful or more out of touch, the ways in which they're losing touch is so helpful. I mean, what a great source of upward mentorship that is available to anyone.
100%. I always say you don't have to be the expert. You just have to be an expert. You just have to know more or have a perspective different than the person you're talking to. And that happens everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
I was talking to this woman at a Forte event over the summer who was clearly very good at Instagram and was really loved Instagram, but also was saying, like, back to authenticity and strategy, I don't think my senior male colleagues thinks Instagram is like what serious business people do. They think it's like frivolous and kid stuff. So what do I do with this? I'm a social media person, but like they don't value it. And I said, well, have you ever used your skill on social media to help them? And she was like, what do you mean? I said, well, look, it's the reality. I'm on social media, but I didn't grow up with it. I don't consider myself particularly good. So if someone 20 years younger than me said, hey, Alison, I have some ideas. Could I video your next thing and give you a clip for your social? 100%. I've looked at your profile page, whatever that thing is, and I have some edits, 100%. So you just have to think about something that you do. And that when you think about differences in rank or biological age, it often means that you come into contact with totally different things. Like even, I mean, all kinds of stuff. Like all my
One of my advisees, one of the most helpful things they ever said, they were super fashionable and they were like, Alison, you're so stylish and fashionable, but you really need a new handbag. And I was like, oh my God, you're so right. Like, thank you so much for reminding. It was like filled with like diapers and board meeting notes and stuff. And I just hadn't had time to think about it. And I was so grateful that they pointed that out to me. Like what, and that's competent, that's brave, it's courageous, it's definitely mentorship, it's upward mentorship.
right.
So it can come
Absolutely.
from anywhere. It can be work-based, it can be style-based, it could be whatever, wherever your expertise is, like use that to help other people and you will be a mentor.
Absolutely. We're 100% aligned. I put in the chat, someone asked about who are the two women we should follow. There's these two sisters, their brand is Small Bits of Happiness. That's their website. They have a podcast, they have other stuff. But I did not know them from anybody. They reached out to me with a cold email. Will you be on our podcast? And I'm like, these are two like 15, 16-year-olds. I was so impressed with the cold outreach that I don't often say yes to that, but I'm like, we verified they were not like serial killers. They're legitimate, amazing women in Canada. And they have this great thing and they're doing great work for teenagers. And I feel like everybody should listen to them.
Amazing. Alison, I've had so much fun just talking to you. It's so fun and enlightening. You're so insightful. I love your book so, so much. I want to give you the final word here in our webinar. To leave, we're so grateful to all of you guys for attending the webinar and listening. I think attending a webinar where we can't see you can be a little dehumanizing and mortifying for everybody involved. But I want to give you, Alison, the final word, a parting word to leave with our Behavioral Insights Group students.
Yeah, well, first of all, just thank you for being here. Thank you to Alison, who really does all the heavy lifting on doing this as to talk with me. This is one of my final words, is that I got to be one of the lucky people to get Alison's book in advance. It is spectacular. We are very aligned in trying to use behavioral science to help people do very practical things to live very authentically and very fully. And I think this is really what I would say is, like I always say, I am talking to people who already have all the goods. You care about other people and you're great at what you do. All we need to think about is how do we get the world to see that truth in us? And that is what we are trying to achieve. That's what I really want for everybody, that they deserve it. And if I can play any role in that, I am very happy to do it. So if I can be helpful in advance, reach out to me. I'm so grateful for you sharing everyone in this hour of your day with us. Alison and I could talk for 6 hours, but we'll take the one we're given.
Exactly. You guys, you heard it from Alison. Thank you for attending and get out there and make the world see your greatness. We believe in you and have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much, Alison Fragale.
Thank you.